Hello, and thanks for joining me on this episode of Simply Saturday. My name is Julie, and this is Stamp with Julie Baum. In my Saturday series called Simply Saturday, I like to show you a card that is fast and easy to make, and that's what we'll be doing today. Let me show you the parts that we're going to need to create this card. I have started with a thick piece of basic white cardstock. This is 5.5 by 8.5. I have scored it at 4 1/4 and I'm going to fold it there and reinforce my fold. I do like to use the thick white cardstock if it's going to be my card base. It seems to be just a little bit sturdier than the regular weight cardstock, which I use for nearly everything else. All right, today's card is going to go in this direction, and I have a piece of Crumb Cake cardstock. This piece measures 4 inches by 5 1/4, and we will be attaching it to the front of the card. And then I've got some designer series paper. Now, my designer series paper is actually recently retired. This was a set of paper called Tea Boutique. So although these papers are retired, the stamp set that we'll be using, Cup of Tea, is still available in the new annual catalog. So the reason I chose these papers, even though they're retired, is they're not necessarily coordinating exactly with the stamps, but it's a floral and a stripe. So if you don't have any Tea Boutique paper left over, then you can definitely look through your stash and find perhaps a floral and a stripe, or a floral and some other smaller print. Okay, so these are going to go together. They're going to get glued down onto our Crumb Cake piece of cardstock. So we're going to do that first. This piece in the red print measures 3 3/4 inches by 3 inches. And this piece measures 3 3/4 inches by 2 inches. So when they're put together, the total width across here is 5 inches, which is nice because this is 5 1/4. So my 5-inch of designer series paper is going to fit nicely on there. Okay, so that's how I came up with where to cut these sizes to get those dimensions. So let's go ahead and attach those. I'm using the multi-purpose liquid glue. And I will attach this to the left side of the Crumb Cake cardstock, kind of looking at my borders, top, bottom, and left, and getting it as straight as I can. I'm just going to set it there for a second in case I need to slide it around. And then my second piece of paper is going to butt up right against it. And I want to check the borders around it as well. There we go. And I am pretty happy with that, so I will give it a press and get that secured down onto the Crumb Cake cardstock. All right, then this piece is going to get attached to the card front, made out of that thick cardstock. Once we've got that in place, that's looking good, then we will do our stamping. All right, so this little piece of cardstock for our stamping measures 2.5 inches by 3 inches. So I wanted to get a piece that was going to lay nicely here, but I also didn't want to cover up too much of this beautiful paper that I've already put in place. So you'll find that this size is going to work well. All right, I'm going to bring in a Stampin' Pierce mat and my photopolymer stamps from Cup of Tea. The first thing I have is the striped cup, and I will use Crumb Cake to stamp my teacup. Then we're going to be using Garden Green and Sweet Sorbet. All right, so with Crumb Cake, and I'm going to try to put this teacup at the bottom of this little piece and center it left and right. There's my cup. All right, then next, let's go to this little leafy stamp. of green stems and garden green ink. Now, when you stamp these little stems, you can actually get quite close to where you want to be. Since it's a photopolymer stamp, it's clear, so you can see through it and determine the placement. But I really do want it to be precise. So here's an easy little trick. You can just grab a Post-it note. I actually have a mini one. I think this one will work. Otherwise, I'll get a full-size one. Nope, this is going to work great. I'm going to lay the straight edge right across the top edge of the cup. Only because the angle I'm sitting, I need to turn it sideways so I can see it a little bit better. If I was to lean in to get a better visual, I would be in your way so that you can't see. So there we go. All right, I've got my Post-it lined straight up across the top of the teacup. Now, if my little leafy branches come down a teeny bit too low, it's fine because they're going to hit that Post-it note. And then once we remove the Post-it, our green branches are going to look like they're coming right up out of the cup. So you can see they're stamped a teeny bit on the edge of that Post-it, but we can remove that, and now my green leaves are coming up out of the cup just perfectly. So that's a great trick. It doesn't take too much time. All right, and then with Sweet Sorbet, we'll add our flowers. This is an interesting looking stamp, the way that they're on there. But what happens is once you ink it and put it in place, basically I'm going to look at this space here and that flower right there and just kind of drop it into place. They don't really line up exactly with a particular stem. They just kind of fill in like so. So that takes all of the worry or anxiety out of it because your flowers are just going to fit in there just fine. Okay, we're going to move those out of the way. There is the tiniest stamp in this set. It is this one. I mean, that is the tiniest font, and I've actually never used it before, so we're going to use it today. And I'm going to get that stamped right down here in this bottom corner. I used Sweet Sorbet for that as well. Okay, that's our stamping, except for the inside. If you want to have a little bit stamped on the inside, I would recommend this single flower stamp that's from the same set. And with that, I would choose either top corner or bottom corner, or if you like both, you can do that. So let's do one in the top. I can't decide if I'm going to do 1 or 3 in the bottom. So I think what I'll do is 1 and then a second one without re-inking. So I got a lighter version and a third. All right, that's how I'm going to do the inside. Of course, you can decide what you want on the inside of your card. Okay, our stamping is done. The last thing we need to do is grab our linen thread. Now I have a piece here that is 17 inches long, and when it comes to you, it's on a little spool like this. And so sometimes it's kind of curly. And so what I recommend before you go to use it on your project is just pinch it between your fingers and kind of stretch it out like that. And that will take some of that curl out of it, so it's not so difficult to work with. Okay, so that got it quite a bit straighter. Now we're going to take this little piece. I'm going to lay my twine on the top of the cup, and I am leaving a little bit of a tail there. Then I'm going to wrap around once, twice. Now with those 2 tails, I want to tie a bow. Now I know from trying this before on other projects that working with the twine can be a little tricky. It's very fine. So what I'm going to do is actually tie a knot first to hold it into place before I tie my bow. That is totally optional. You can just tie your bow at this point if you feel confident in that. But I've got my thumb here holding the twine taut, and then I've got my 2 ends, and I'm going to pull my knot just to hold it right there in place. Okay, now that's not going to go anywhere. Now I can take my ends and make my loops and finish my bow. Now, I've seen some other demonstrators quite effectively use their cross-lock tweezers, and I do have some of those. I don't think I'm either very good at it, or there really could be the fact that mine don't close very tight. But when you're in that situation, you can take your, let me get mine, I'll show you. You can take your reverse or your cross-lock scissors and hold that little knot for you while you tie your bow. But mine isn't very tight and it tends to just slip out. So I will let you experiment with that method. All right, I've got my bow now in place, and I'm going to trim those tails a little bit. I don't mind leaving them a little bit long. I think they look nice. And then we're going to attach this to the card. Let's use some dimensionals to do that. I'm going to use 6 of them. The first 2 are going to also help anchor that twine in place, just so it doesn't move around. And then 2 in these corners and 2 more in the other corners. All right, now if you feel like 4 would hold it, then just use 4. I felt like I needed those extras. And now we can remove the backings. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, and then this is going to go right here where the 2 designer papers meet. And you might want to be a little conscientious about your stripes here. That could determine your placement. See, if I go really low down here, actually this paper looks like it's cut better than I imagined, because what I wanted to make sure is that I got some white and some crushed curry showing and not end up covering one color entirely like that. But I've got enough room to put it right about there. I don't really want it centered between the top and the bottom. It's a little bit closer to the bottom. And there we have our Simply Saturday card. I'm so excited to use up some of these papers. I know that you probably have some paper that has retired as well, and you're eager to use it on your projects. So this is a good example of using a larger piece with a smaller piece to create a nice background. Of course, Cup of Tea stamp set is adorable. It has coordinating dies. You can do so much with this stamp set. It's really been a favorite, and I'm glad that it's still around. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. I look forward to stamping with you again next time, and until then, happy stamping!